Welcome everybody to Go Local Live. I'm Josh Fenton, CEO and co-founder. What we've all been waiting for, yes, Jennifer Lawless, chair of the political science department at the University of Virginia. We have not talked to her in like 2 weeks. Everything in the world is going on. I'm in like the shivers. We're so excited here. Chair, welcome
Hello.
back to Go Local.
Thank you.
All right, let's go right to it. We have so much to talk about. $1.9 trillion is sitting before the United States Senate. It's hard to even say the word $1 trillion. What's the status of it today?
It's going to pass, and it's going to pass with no bipartisan support. And as a result, I think we're just basically suggesting that there is no crisis and no pandemic and no global health concern that is more important than partisanship to Mitch McConnell and Senate Republicans. And the reason I say that is because the previous packages that have been used for coronavirus aid under the Trump administration passed with pretty significant bipartisan support. So the fact that the Republicans are unwilling to get on board with this, even if they don't like all of the pieces of it, even if they think it's too much money overall, just really demonstrates that as we're finally beginning to make some headway, as the vaccine is finally beginning to be distributed and there's a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel, they're basically saying not so fast.
In fairness to the Republicans, there wasn't a lot of conciliation on the behalf of, there's a couple little things here and there. And also, if you woke up today at about 8:30, the Department of Labor released the jobs numbers. Last week, the country had lost just under 800,000 jobs. This week, up 370 something thousand, I think 378 or something. An indication that the economy is starting to come back. Sure, we've still got 9 million plus who are unemployed, but if you're a Republican, isn't that support for your position of we don't need to do $1 trillion packages, maybe just hundreds of billions of dollars would be sufficient?
Well, I have two reactions to that. The first is that the Democrats won the election, and we would not be in a position where if Donald Trump was reelected, he would be making any sort of nice moves with the Democrats to reach any kind of compromise. And the fact that the Republicans are unwilling to accept that, I think demonstrates a difference between the two parties. I don't know that it's the wrong strategy, right? The Democrats in a lot of ways have been far too conciliatory over time, but Joe Biden won the election and the Senate is controlled by Democrats and the House is controlled by Democrats. So even though those margins are tiny, that's how you pass legislation. The second thing I would note is if we've learned nothing over the course of the last year, I would at least hope that we've seen that this virus ebbs and flows. And we've been here before. We've seen economic upticks in the past, and then we've seen surges that were very, very difficult to get beyond. We are coming off of what was basically a triple surge. And at this point, to assume that just because the vaccine is out there and we're not going to necessarily be as poorly off as we were in November and December, that everything is looking brighter and we should put less money toward this, I think is pretty short-sighted, especially given that as we speak, multiple states are easing their restrictions and some are getting rid of them altogether.
You said it didn't have bipartisan support. Joe Manchin?
I mean, what I will say about Joe Manchin, I spend a lot of time bashing Joe Manchin, but I think as far as the Democrats are concerned, it's important to remember that Donald Trump won West Virginia by 40 points. So The fact that there is a Democratic senator coming out of there means that there are some concessions that, sometimes do have to be made. And he is going to be one of the most important people, at least for the next 2 years, when it comes to what the Biden administration can get done and not get done. But he, too, said, look, we've been talking about this for 8 months right now. These numbers are not really new. The plan is not new. It's important to try and reach out and get bipartisan support, but we've learned from the past. It doesn't mean that we should wait forever to pass meaningful legislation. So, on this one, I think he's right.
If the Republicans were really smart, wouldn't they old school it, brown paper bag, a pile, and get Joe Manchin to switch from Democrat to Republican? He's almost switched previously.
He has, but I think it's difficult to convince somebody to switch when they would be switching out of majority party control.
Well, he'd be switching out of majority to create a new majority.
But he wouldn't have the White House or the House on his side.
Right.
So right now he's pretty pivotal. If Trump would have won the election, and the Senate was a 50-50 split, I think that the incentives would probably be stronger.
Okay, let's jump over to Governor Gina Raimondo, former Governor Gina Raimondo, now U.S. Secretary of Commerce. How's that being welcomed amongst the Washingtonian elite?
Well, I think the best thing that happened to Gina Raimondo was Neera Tanden. This is a situation where the focus for the last couple of weeks has been on Neera Tanden, whether she could get confirmed to run the OMB, and her background and her qualifications and what she had done right and what she had done wrong in her previous positions. And what that meant was other nominees who were up for their confirmation hearings during the same time, who might have been treated a little bit more skeptically, kind of got a pass, because there was no way that the Republicans were going to try to take down two women as part of the economic team, and Neera Tanden seemed more vulnerable. So I think Raimondo has been very well received. She passed through with a very, very substantial vote, and she looks to be on her way.
And how important, we've been around secretaries of commerce. When Raimondo was first rumored, I don't know, in October or something, to be on the short list for Commerce or potentially HHS. I remember going to look through the list of secretaries of commerce. There's a couple of notable ones, but Ron Brown, Elliot Richardson, Herbert Hoover, but not a lot of top A-list politicians in America's history were Secretary of Commerce, and a lot of people don't even know their names.
Right, although Ron Brown was a rising star. So he's the one exception probably, and then his life was cut short. But
Right.
Yeah, I think that that's true. The difference right now potentially is that we're on the verge of, if not economic collapse, then certainly major economic rebuilding, and it's likely that she will get more attention than previous secretaries of commerce have, simply because the Commerce Department is going to be so involved in so much of the rebuilding domestically, but also trade deals internationally. So I wouldn't be surprised if she's somewhat more prominent than some previous secretaries of commerce. But yeah, it's not this obvious stepping stone to become president of the United States.
Except for in the case of Herbert Hoover, who was Secretary of Commerce and then went on to the presidency later on in his career. We know how all that ended. Let's go to New York. You know the state quite well. The governor, we just lost Gina Raimondo, GoLocal did. We would like to adopt Andrew Cuomo here to GoLocal and put reporters on that and talk about it from an analysis standpoint, because that's the best show in town. I'm not sure if Oprah and Meghan Markle and Prince Harry is better, or Andrew Cuomo and all the things that are rolling out there in New York. Your thoughts? Let's start with, now, in a serious mode, 3 allegations of sexual harassment by 3 different women in functionally 3 different environments over the past couple of years.
Yeah, it's not good for Andrew Cuomo. There's no question. What's tricky about these allegations is that they don't cross that line of this obvious, oh my gosh, he must resign immediately, right? These are all allegations that are beyond investigation worthy, and an investigation is underway. But these are the kinds of things where, perception matters. Andrew Cuomo was saying he had no idea that he was making these women feel uncomfortable. These women are saying, how could you possibly not know that? You're creepy. And it is being investigated. These are the tricky ones, because these become he said, she said. And what becomes most important is that there is a systematic, objective investigation, and that there are consequences if, in fact, there are findings. I'm not surprised that Andrew Cuomo is not going to resign at this point, because he says that he never touched anybody inappropriately. And if this comes down to making people feel uncomfortable with his words, then he apologizes. That's tricky. People don't necessarily agree. There's not a general consensus at this point on whether that's resignation worthy. If he had laid a hand on anybody, or if he had, especially in a working environment, there's no question that he would be in a different position right now. But so he's right on that fine line, and he and his administration have decided that they're going to try and thread that needle.
You're such a good Democratic political scientist. I believe one of the women said he tried to kiss her, and another one said he tried to kiss her and moved away after he had grabbed her from the small of the back. But God bless you. Couple this.
I'm not. I do want to be clear though. Like, I'm not an apologist here. I just think that we've seen some other cases that are so egregious and so clear cut. This is still one of those sets of circumstances where the investigation becomes so important, because what's going on here and making sure that the women can feel heard, making sure that he can, explain his side of the story is so vital. But I mean, I'm certainly not justifying his behavior.
I will remind everyone that many years ago, Bob Packwood, very powerful chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, a number of women made allegations. Functionally, I mean, it was almost cartoonish of him chasing them around desks in the office, trying to kiss them. I mean, it was both pathetic and comical and offensive. And he resigned, and resigned fairly swiftly, and has been a pariah in nationally and in Oregon. I asked somebody out there when we had a GoLocal site there, and asked them about it, and said, has he ever recovered? It was probably 10 years after he had resigned. They said, oh no, he can never come back here in Oregon. So his wife's very prominent, but he was functionally excommunicated there for similar allegations.
Right. The counter to that is Al Franken, who I think most Democrats would say resigned too quickly. Part of the reason that Al Franken resigned quite quickly was because we were amid a special election for the Alabama Senate seat. Jeff Sessions had just been made Attorney General, and it looked like the Republicans were going to win that race with Roy Moore, who was a pedophile. And I think that the Democrats felt like they had to get Franken out as soon as the allegations surfaced, because otherwise they would not look credible in trying to oust Moore once he won the election. When Doug Jones won the election, I think there was some degree of remorse among Democrats for not engaging in a more systematic investigatory move and, providing Al Franken some degree of due process. So the political concerns are always very, very relevant. I think that Cuomo's biggest issue right now is that this is coming on top of another scandal where he seemed dishonest. And so if people were inclined to give him the benefit of the doubt and believe him, this is happening right after he lied to New Yorkers and he lied to the American people about data regarding the nursing homes. So, this is not, he's not going to be accorded any sort of benefit of the doubt, I don't think.
Yeah, and in New York, the charge is that they characterized where people died, whether or not they died in hospitals versus nursing homes, and somewhat cooked the data, although he did not make the strategic error that Governor Raimondo made here in Rhode Island by taking those coming out of nursing homes who got infected, went to hospitals, and then in Rhode Island, not in New York, they were then returned to the nursing homes with coming out of the infection and spread the infections, leading to literally hundreds of deaths. That took place in Rhode Island. That miscue from a medical standpoint did not take place in New York. So this is the numbers, how they were, and clearly it appears that there was direction from the governor's office of how to manipulate this data.
Yeah, and the important factor here, too, was that because those deaths were counted as hospital deaths, not nursing home deaths, the nursing homes, my understanding is, went on lockdown later than would have otherwise been the case, because it didn't look as though COVID was spreading as prevalently among the nursing homes as it actually was. So while there was no reintroduction of COVID into the nursing homes from the hospitals, the delay in the way in which those deaths were counted delayed the closing of the nursing homes.
Can he survive this? I'm surprised he's made it this week. I thought he'd be done by Tuesday.
Well, I've got to tell you, I live in Virginia, and you might recall that Governor Ralph Northam, who's currently governor, had that blackface incident, and the lieutenant governor, Justin Fairfax, was accused of rape, and both are still in office. So my recent political past and experiences with Virginia government makes nothing seem beyond the pale at this point.
The one difference might be, and maybe it looks too opportunistic, every enemy, Democrat or Republican, of Andrew Cuomo, and it is a long list. This is like Santa checking the naughty list, right? This is a long sheet of paper, are all coming out asking for him to resign.
That's true, but in fact, because it's this long sheet of paper and it's people that have probably wanted him to resign for a long time, it looks more political than might otherwise be the case. And I think that is what actually reinforces and allows him to dig in his heels and say, I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to be bullied. The irony, of course, is that so many people don't like him and want him to resign because they perceive of him as a bully.
Right.
So, we'll see. I will say that the manner in which he communicated with New Yorkers for almost a full year after the first coronavirus case was identified in New York, and the transparency, with the exception of the nursing home counting, the transparency with which he's talked about the steps for reopening and scaling back and everything else. His approval rating was very, very high, even among Republicans. And he's a household name in a way that a lot of governors are not. So it's, in some ways, he has a lot going for him in terms of allowing him to finish this term. In other ways, the enemies list is quite long and based on a lot of different reasons.
Professor, you get the last word. What should folks be looking for? Today's Friday. This package, $1.9 trillion package, still not approved. What should we be looking for, timing on that, coupled with where does the Biden administration pivot next?
I would be surprised if we don't have the bill signed, sealed, delivered, and checks beginning to be issued by next week at this time. So I think we're talking a matter of days now, not a matter of weeks. As far as moving forward is concerned, the Biden administration has had a tough time staffing up all of the bureaucracy, largely because for the first couple of weeks, they were only working part-time. The Senate was only working part-time because of impeachment. I wouldn't be surprised if we spend the next couple of weeks making sure that all of these nominees get confirmed and that they're in a position to start hiring and filling all of their agencies, because it's difficult to pass any other meaningful legislation, including infrastructure, where there would likely be bipartisan support, if you don't have political appointees in the positions that you need them. So I would say that that is one of the most important things that we'll see over the course of the next couple of weeks. The other thing I would note is that, we're at a point right now where Merrick Garland will very, very soon be confirmed as Attorney General. And the manner in which the Justice Department chooses to go after people that were involved in the January 6th insurrection will likely be among the top issues that the American people will be looking at over the course of the next month.
Professor Jennifer Lawless, Chair of the Political Science Department at the University of Virginia, thank you so much. Hopefully we will never have to go through such a drought like this ever again on this. And for everybody else, we're going to be back in about 15 minutes with Dr. Michael Fine, former Director of Health for the state of Rhode Island, talking about Governor McKee's decision yesterday, and in light of very strong criticism from Dr. Fauci against governors who are loosening up restrictions right now, very worried about this being the triggering point for a third wave. Everybody, please stay safe. We'll see you back in about 15 minutes, and please, please wear your mask.